And this afternoon we're going to talk about a lot of bad news, but we're going to do so with an excellent, excellent company. Four very different people, from very different backgrounds, very different gifts, each of them. But I think together we have a company here that is able to discuss very frankly and with a lot of expertise how to proceed from here. Because I think we all agree that catastrophes like these are no reason to just surrender. On the contrary, we'll have to go on. To me, this topic is very special. It was announced to all of us like this. In countries that used to form a part of the communist bloc, all politicians right across the political spectrum insist there is no such thing as the right to migration. And the main reason is the culture of the migrants is alien to us. So the question for this afternoon, one of the questions for this afternoon is, does the cohabitation with Muslim communities entail any real dangers, and what might they be? Well, certainly our societies apparently run the real danger of bloody attacks like what happened Friday night. But does this have to do with the influx of refugees? Does this have to do with the presence of Muslims in all our communities? That is what we're going to discuss. To me personally, it's a daily question. I am the chairman of the Amsterdam Council of Refugee Organizations. So in Amsterdam too, this is the talk of the day. I just returned from the north of Syria a few weeks ago, where mostly the Kurds have created an autonomous region where they're trying to create a radical democracy, bottom-up democracy, total gender equality, and at the same time they're fighting ISIS. So that is a very special, inspiring place, and also from there, of course, people are fleeing this way to Europe, to the promised Europe, and that's what we're going to talk about. Now, after Paris, immediately security all over Europe is tightening. Decent politicians and decent voices in the media warn us not to link this terror attack to the refugee question, but of course everyone does. So we today, in the company of two gifted young writers, in the company of the Human Rights Commissioner of the city of Vienna, in the company of political analyst Ivan Krastev, we'll try to wrap our thoughts and experience about these complex questions. We have no weapons, we have no huge power or influence, but we have our curiosity, we have the will to learn, to share our experiences, and let's try to make something out of this. Let's try to create something out of this. That is what this forum is for. Let's start by a quote that I want to offer to all of you, which was written Friday night in Haaretz, of all papers, the liberal newspaper in Israel. Anshel Pfeiffer wrote, "There is no reason whatsoever at this moment to connect the attacks to the refugees, fleeing death and chaos themselves. But when dozens of civilians have just been gunned down in one of Europe's main capital cities, reason may be in short supply." So I would like to ask all of you to tell us how in your city and country have the people and media, have they or have they not been linking the attacks to the refugee question? And maybe we'll start right here in Bratislava with Michal Voretsky. You might know him. He will speak in Slovak while the others will speak in English.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I think that this Friday tragedy in Paris has shown what is a problem of the Slovak discourse on refugees. And we have again been reminded that Slovakia has a long way to go. And that's an issue that will make our society even more divided. We are already deeply divided, and that will get even worse. And what we see is that anti-European understanding or streams in our society have come to the surface. Our government is even going to sue the EU for the quota system in the refugee issue. So we can see that Slovakia has revealed many other problems of our civil society. It's a young civil society. We are afraid of otherness of other cultures, and we still have to face problems and to try to cope with them, with problems other societies know for centuries and mastered it much better. Our society is quite homogeneous and closed. We were not able to create an open society as you have in the Western liberal societies or countries. And for me, these last developments showed that we have also a strong society, a society which wants to be solidar, which wants to be tolerant. We want to find solutions and not to spread panic and fear. There is a large group of people who wants to have a more open society, more tolerant society, and more colorful society. The specific feature of Slovakia is that in contrast to other countries from my partners here on the panel, we have 5,600 churches, but non-mosque. And the status of Muslims in our country is very restricted. And we are, in fact, fighting a virtual problem. We don't have any refugees. In our independent history, we have 550 asylum seekers who were granted it. So it's a microscopic number compared to the Western countries. Take Germany, Austria, the Netherlands. So this problem is here. It seems to be super big, but it's not real. It is not that we would be jeopardized by refugees or whatever. It's not true. And there are maybe some dozens of people who will come and already are here. We are not the target station. We are only a temporary stay during the asylum procedures. And I'm afraid that Paris will only strengthen and reinforce what we have already here, which is propaganda flooding the people.
Thanks for this overview. We needed to hear this. So you're describing a country that is generally fighting a fictional problem until now. We'll talk about that later, because you have to take these arguments seriously as well. But how was the immediate reaction among in this city, among the people and in the media to the question, should we link the terrorist attack to the refugee question?
Samozrejme, oficiálne médiá sa snažia držať.
Of course, official media try to look for the truth, for the facts, but there already is a number of conspiracy theories that have emerged because this is, of course, an evidently a very catchy topic, and I felt sick when I saw several expressions of this interest because there is they're trying to compare something that's incomparable, Palestine, Donbass, and all other things. So they try to manipulate, they try to...
And Donbass and this?
Robia to vlastne stále zo
They do it all the time with all the possible and impossible topics. They're mixing themes in order to confuse people rather than to inform them. And people...
Posolstvo je zhruba...
The message is roughly that all are evil, all refugees are terrorists, and these are the classical intros that help disseminate hatred. And unfortunately, also the political discourse in this country follows the same lines. Instead of trying to find a solution, they spread the panic, fear. They allege that it's necessary to again close the borders by pretending that we are protecting Slovaks against evil refugees.
Response here, in the let's say the popular response here would be to close the borders and use Paris as a proof why. Yeah? Olumide Popula, you're a writer, you're a performer, you are based in London, you're a Nigerian-German artist, so I think you're a real Afro-European citizen and artist. Tell us about London, city that went through attacks of its own. How, and a city which is, I mean, very much alive and present in the whole refugee discussion. How is the immediate response there to this link between the attacks and the refugees?
I think it's similar in the sense of the respectable media will wait for the facts and try to find out and get behind everything, but people will use this as a legitimation for their views. In the summer, when there was this idea that all the refugees from Calais are trying to storm into Britain, I found that throughout the media there seemed to be one streamlined view towards producing panic and fear and fooling this. And I'm really, really worried that what's happened in Paris now will make it come true. See, we have to close our borders because it's not possible, because the refugee is mostly a terrorist. And you were saying in your introduction something about the refugees, and I think that's the problem. There is no the. This is such a complex issue, but as human beings, and this is where I come from a background as a writer and as a novelist, that human nature is so complex. We as beings are so complex. This problem is so complex. I was not in London. I have not seen everything. So I feel tiny little bit ill-equipped, but I'm pretty sure that media like The Sun will just take this and run with it. The Daily Mail has already said, okay, see, the refugees, they sneaked in through the refugee route. And I'm very particular also cued into language, the sneaking, because it's not just for this particular attack. It's supposed to carry over into how we view refugees as not just illegal people, but people who are sneaking in, doing something that they're not supposed to do. And the effect of this is detrimental. Yeah.
You're touching upon one of the primary things people like us can do immediately, being accurate in the language you choose.
Yes.
Being accurate in the way you speak about the people we're speaking about. Now, UK is, people in UK, powers in UK are using this Paris attack as another reason to close the borders. You've been on the other side of the border. You're working together with Annie Holmes on a book based on stories of the people who are now stranded in Calais, on the other side of the border, on this side of the tunnel in France, in the so-called jungle, where thousands of people are stuck in very poor conditions. You were there in October a few times, you told me. Have you been speaking to people after Paris?
No, I just checked in, because immediately after Paris there was a huge fire in the Sudanese area of the camp, and initially for quite a while people thought it was retaliation from the right-wing side, because that also happens. There used to be kind of a regular occurrence of fascists really just driving into the camp and trying to kick refugees. So all I managed to do is check the people that I've interviewed personally, are they okay? But also in the process found out that fire was just an accident. There have been vigils in the Calais camp, and there's a bigger camp. I'm not going to name it because I'm not sure how wider known it is, to show their support and also to distinguish. These are not the Syrian refugees who are terrorists. These are people fleeing the terrorism in their own country. So they wanted to quickly also show their support, make that distinction. And there's a from our last trip, we took a beautiful picture that was a big banner in one of the tents, and it said, and it was in the Sudanese camp, and it was a message, mostly to UK people, that we are fleeing from genocide. We're fleeing from Darfur. We're not trying to sneak in to take something away from you. We're not trying to destroy your country. We're trying to be safe somewhere. And I think these vigils is all the people there can do to show where they stand.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Have you already heard anything about French policy, which is understandably in turmoil right now, to clamp down further on the Calais camp?
I haven't, but I'm pretty sure it will be, because there's something happening already. So in the last 2-3 weeks, people have been relocated from the camp en masse, and
To where?
So there's two different narratives. One is to give them a rest, which is a weird thing. People who are undocumented, it's like, oh, hey, camp is uncomfortable, I'll give you a rest. So they've been taken to camps where they have rooms and they have showers and they have all the facilities. And they start then their process. But there is belief among some of the groups that are working there that a large number will be deported, that it's in a way a ploy, and to get people away from Calais, to distribute them all over the country. And they've been put in small communities. Now, if you think about a small place with 5,000 people who have never maybe dealt with the other, and other now with the capital or with people who are very different, and you put in 500 Sudanese people from Darfur, leave everybody to themselves.
Yeah.
Things are not going well at the moment. You have Paris attacks. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have to have an active imagination to follow that thought through.
Recipe for problems. We'll get back to that later. Then Shams Azadi, you are the Human Rights Commissioner for the city of Vienna. You're a cosmopolitan yourself, of Iranian background, worked in the US, you worked in Austria, of course, for a long time as an urban planner, urban regenerator. Now, last year, you in Vienna opened up the Human Rights Office, and you created the Human Rights Agenda for the city of Vienna. So, well on time, great timing at this moment. What's been the reaction in Vienna between all these refugees that the city has been taking in and the Paris attacks?
Dobre dan. It's very good to be here again. Actually, it's very early if I speak about our policies. It happened just on last Friday. And
you don't have to speak about policies, just about first response.
The first response was the city of Vienna, because, as you know, in Austria, the Austrian politicians and policies, it's quite different from the one in Vienna. We have two different just coalitions, and then we have two different just political direction, I would say.
The Vienna policy being more liberal than the national government?
More liberal, and then, of course, human rights city. Vienna is, since last December, is a human rights city, and it's not just this human rights city, it didn't just fell down from the sky, because we really worked on it, and we had the process. We had a 2 years process, and then it was the leadership, and we have since 2000, actually from 1992, we have a lot of strategies on integration and on diversity and everything. So it's a long, long way that we have gone, and then we are here. But the first reactions, it was quite clear that we had in our official media and the official ORF, it's the Austrian public TV, and it was it's the situation, but we are not going to answer this question with war. We have to really keep on our tolerant society and be a tolerant society. And tomorrow is the International Day of Tolerance, and then we are going to have just new strategies in Vienna. But we have a strong right-wing party, and this strong right-wing party told, just not in clearly in official newspapers and just TV or just media, but they started to act through social media. That we told you, and you see, it's the proof that our strategy. We told that if we open our borders up to the refugees, we are going to have terrorists, and it's a proof.
Yeah.
But it's not the official opinion of our politicians. It's just from one party. And unfortunately, this party just won 2 weeks ago about 30% of our elections, even in Vienna. So it is a serious problem, and we have to work on it. But we work again on really just our values and human rights city and about our human rights issues, and not with closing our borders.
Excellent. About your a very important struggle, we'll talk later. But just to check, there's been no immediate backlash, moments of violence, acts of aggression in the city, as you know of since Friday?
No. No violence and no violation and just nothing. We have a really, it was just quite strange because in September, just at the beginning of September, we had the new movement or newcomers or refugees. They came to Austria from borders from Burgenland through Hungary, and then nowadays through Serbia and just Slovenia and just from southern part of Austria. So it was the, if even just really, I believe it, if not because of our strong civil societies activities, maybe our politicians at national level, just if our strong civil society wasn't here, I can imagine we had quite different policies.
I mean, you're probably going to see more tension, obviously, because both movements are so strong.
Of course.
This polarization will rise only.
Of course, but just to be honest, our very strong civil society and just their activities, they really pushed our politicians to just be very human, or just they told we have to have really just humanitarian policies, just according. I mean, it was impossible to have a really rigid politicians in Austria. It was impossible because people, they went to Hungary and they took the refugees with their own cars, and police didn't just stop them, and they came to Vienna. And just even in my office, it was the opening of my office in September, and a huge group of civil societies, they came in and they told, look, how can we just storage the things that people just they just donate us? I told, use my office, no problem. And at that moment, I didn't need to just see if my public administration will allow me or not. Just
do it.
You have to really, you have to just do it.
It's great to see a real believer and action hero right here. Ivan Kostev. No, you have your own microphone. So Ivan Kostev, for people who don't know him, because he's a familiar face here at the forum, he's a political scientist from Sofia, Bulgaria, where he chairs the Center for Liberal Studies. He's the editor-in-chief of the Bulgarian edition of Foreign Policy, and right now based in Vienna as a permanent fellow at the Institute of Human Sciences. You're based in Vienna, but you're from Sofia. Can I ask you, can you tell us how the response has been in Sofia?
Listen, people are scared, and it's quite normal. And when you talk about conspiracy theories, generally in Bulgaria we have more conspiracy theories per person than usually it is. So from this point of view, there is nothing new about it. But I do believe that we should not go into the other direction. Basically say, you see, people, they don't have any kind of a reason to be scared. I'm going to tell you why it is a security threat. Because all the police attention now is focused on the refugees. So from this point of view, if you talk about a real security problem, there is a security problem. People are scared. And from this point of view, I do believe that the strongest words didn't come even from the social media. The Pope today said that we're in the Third World War. You have the French president speaking about a war. You have the Polish government that decided that they're not going to accept refugees because of the Paris. So from this point of view, there is a political moment. Bulgaria, from this point of view, is slightly different than Slovakia. We have mosques. 10% of the population are Bulgarian Turks. We used to be part of the Ottoman Empire. And from this point of view, I want just to make one point that from time to time is very important to be made, because otherwise we can go into the other extreme. Part of the scaredness of the people is not simple xenophobia, but this is the fear that situation is getting out of control. They have the feeling that the governments are not controlling anything, and listen, they have a good reason for this. Bulgarian government is not famous for effectiveness. And I'm not saying even ironically. Basically, they look around and said, probably they're not terrorists, but if terrorists decide to come, could we stop them? Also, I do believe that we, by ourselves, we became so much Europe-centered for such a long time that now simply we discover that we live in a world. Just give you one example. A month ago, there was a major terrorist attack in Ankara. Hundreds of people were killed. Do you remember us on the forums like this, making speeches like this? People who have been killed, obviously, of terrorist attack on the Russian plane were more than the people that were killed in Paris. Do you see making out a big political issue? Of course, the Russian government itself didn't make a political issue because they were trying to the last moment to insist that it's an accident. But I'm saying that in a certain way, all the idea of overreaction is based on the fact that in Europe we're used to the level of security that is not going to be here anymore. And this is the biggest challenge. So from this point of view, it's not that this happened to Paris. It's not, of course, there's xenophobia around, but it's not explains everything. Part of the explanation is that people know that we're living in a different world.
Yeah. So you're saying it's not just the fear of the unknown, but it's also the fear about the people you know very well, the politicians that are ruling you. But just to go back to the Bulgarian situation, I believe you have refugees, people come through the Turkish border, not so many, but they're there, treated very harshly. And you began your story by saying that you expect the police presence and the police activity to step up. Do you believe this will be the case in Bulgaria towards the refugees that are there?
Listen, people in places like Slovakia, but even Austria, Germany, started to talk about the refugee crisis in the last 6 months. For places like Greece or Italy or Bulgaria, the problem started earlier. The ugly part of this is that in the beginning of this crisis, on your border, you're treating people in the way to suggest to them that it's better to go from somewhere else. This is what was happening, and this was happening on the Italian borders, on Bulgarian borders, on Greek borders. Unlike Slovakia or Czech Republic or Poland, Bulgarian government, also because of the fact that you have 10% Bulgarian Muslims, they're there, you respect them, their reality, we didn't say that we're not going to accept the refugees. But for us it was very much about where are the borders of Europe. Is this the borders of Schengen on the Hungarian border? Or is this the Bulgarian border, the Macedonian border? Because don't forget, part of the fear of Bulgarian, Macedonian and Serbian governments are quite legitimate. These places can end up as the refugee camp for Europe. Do you know what is 400,000? Now we're talking officially about 100,000 people this winter staying in very weak states like Macedonia or Serbia, very low economic level. So the problem of solidarity is also kind of a very tricky one. And I do believe that one of the worst that happened to this debate is we do not have an analytical debate anymore. On one level, you have just fear-spreading, basically populist politicians who are trying to make votes out of it. On the other side, you have the moralizing intellectuals trying basically to be on the banal side of the virtue. There is a real problem, and they go country by country, community by community. Just to give you one example of Bulgaria. The failure of our countries to integrate others, you don't need refugees for this. Look at the Roma community. This is what is happening, is absolutely unacceptable. So basically you can see that this society does not know how to integrate even people who speak the language. Secondly, in most of our places there is a major demographic fears. Let's give you Bulgarian figures. According to the UN projections, in 2015, Bulgarian population is going to be 27% less than it is now. You have a fear of disappearance. These are small nations. Most of them the result of the ethnic cleansing after the World War II, with a very high level of ethnic homogeneity, no any type of imperial experience, very different than Amsterdam or Vienna or London. I do believe that these days the difference between Western Europe and Central and Eastern Europe is the difference between the metropolitan city and the countryside. Mm-hmm. In a certain way, Bulgaria looks like the Austrian countryside. If we are not going to understand this, we are trying basically to blame people, but they are kind of a mixture of fears. If we're not going to distinguish between these fears, we're in a certain way playing in the same game some of the populist politicians are trying to do. Because these same people who fear refugees, at the moment they're going to see the concrete refugee. They're human beings. You try to help. In Bulgaria there was also people who are getting people in their families, trying to give money. The most hated refugee is the refugee you have never seen. Mm. And it's not by accident that in European Union, the country with the highest level of unacceptance is not Hungary, it's the Czech Republic, according to the public opinion poll. And there is no anybody in the Czech Republic. The other, of course, talk about Bulgaria is that refugees go through our countries, but they don't want to stay. And somebody said that we should be probably offended by this. Is our country so unattractive? But this is a real issue, and I do believe that the problem with the refugee crisis is that it is very much going to change our societies also beyond the security only. Security changes and border controls are going to increase. Honestly speaking, I do believe that pragmatically for a while this is important, because in a moment of the crisis you're doing symbolic things simply to calm down the public. For example, in Vienna, the bigger fear was that the Syria meeting was there. You have unprecedented security measures. But this is important, because if you cannot show that the situation is under control, then basically people are going to behave totally differently.
Okay. Thank you. This reminds me of what Gilles Kepel, who was supposed to be here, said in Le Monde this morning. He said a few things when asked how to respond to this attack. He said, first, don't answer war by war. So he disagrees with President Hollande, who immediately said, "Okay, this is a war. We're gonna act in the fashion of war." Kepel said, "Don't do that." He said, "But it's very important to have efficient police presence and activity." He referred to the way the police had handled the Charlie Hebdo killings, getting the suspects very quickly and effectively. The other thing is, he said education, of course, but he also meant the education in what he says is the Academy of French Jihad, the prison. So education inside the prison system to counter the radicalization among prisoners, which is, according to him, happening in France. Michal, can I take Ivan Kostev's story to the Slovak situation? Because Ivan warns us not to stick in one of the two camps, the fear-mongering camp or the, how did you call it, the innocent, intellectual... the consciousness of the world camp. I feel directly addressed by that, but that's okay. Michal, could you elaborate on that? Because I think you and people like you have a lot of work to do here. Because now maybe Slovakia is fighting a virtual danger, but who knows? Refugees might be coming in greater numbers. You will have to find some way to deal with them. You will have to take seriously whatever problems arise out of that. How can you become more precise with the people that are now gathering on, let's say, the good side of the story?
pánovi Krastevovi za...
Thank you, Mr. Krasje, for many inspiring comments. So what I want to say is that terrorism always wants to evoke a feeling that the things are out of control. It's a radical, brutal disruption of an order, of the order. So, of course, the governments try to calm the situation. But on the other hand, you have to be very careful, because this is also a pretext very often abused, misused by governments in order to restrict personal freedom, to have more checks and screening and controls, so that we tighten the freedom and we keep opposition under control in a better way. And the problem of Slovakia is that our security policy or strategy is very confusing, and we see now how it is important that, and how damaging it is that we don't have a clear position. So on the one hand, Prime Minister will have always a sitting of the Security Council, then a press conference, they will talk, we will defend Slovakia, this will never happen to us. But on the other hand, Slovakia has a real problem to define its position to NATO. We are not complying with the obligations resulting from a membership in such a security pact. We have strong streams in our society which ask for leaving NATO. They have internet campaign, billboard campaign, social networks. So they cast doubt on the orientation of Slovakia and whether we should be a part of this security bloc. Our Prime Minister is well known for his controversial comments on our security line. So for me, it is mainly populism and variation. I mean, maneuvering between East and West. It seems like to be our destiny, and it doesn't make our security position better. On the other hand, I agree with Mr. Krastev that many East European societies, and Slovakia and Bulgaria are good examples, we have a lot of people who are frustrated, disillusioned, disappointed, long-term unemployed, high figures. And I always say that Slovak problem is not migration, but emigration. And Bulgaria is even in a worse situation than Slovakia. The largest amounts leave Bulgaria, but Slovakia is third worst. So we have accepted these 550 asylum seekers, but our country was left by more than 200,000 people. And I recently came back from Saxonia, Germany, and 12% of the doctors are Slovaks, are Slovak nationals. So it means that every 10 doctor you meet in Saxonia is a person you can speak in Slovak to. So it is not the uneducated, poor people who leave, elites leave. So East European societies suffer from the emigration of the educated population, the elites.
With what Ivan Kastev said just before, that you must look at the people staying behind. So they're seeing many people leave, they're seeing the population decrease. This is reason for insecurity in itself.
Ten dôvod je predovšetkým chudoba.
It's poverty, first of all, it's poverty, and it's not racially conditioned. The poverty hits Slovaks and Romas the same way. So Slovak problem is poverty and different frustrations born out of it. So people from this strata are more easier to become populist victims or extremist victims, and they are happy to get an easy solution. I always say that xenophobia, hatred to refugees is the easiest and politician can do. Any other step is more difficult. To find a solution is more difficult. To find a way how we countries which are not hit by the problem, because the problem passes by, not through us, but by. So it is more difficult to think, to contemplate what could we do. I also think that we should avoid extremes on both sides of the spectrum, but they are afraid to tell the truth.
Something I wanted to ask you. You spoke about this movement of 12,000 people, yeah? And what's it called again?
Ja som spomínal pri našej príprave, že
I mentioned that in Slovakia we had this initiative, Play for Humanity. It was launched in Slovakia. It was the first civil society response to the it was an effort at looking for a different discourse than the uniform political discourse. It's strange because in Slovakia both the so-called right and left wings are uniquely identical as for the attitude towards refugees. So this was an initiative that aimed at uniting different civil society organizations and engage in looking for other solutions.
It's a good initiative. It's fairly large. 12,000 people is not nothing. Are you discussing the strategy towards 2016, when a year from now Slovakia will be chairing the EU, which is always a moment that you're more visible and that you can get your voice heard? Are you creating a strategy towards that?
obávam sa, že
I'm afraid that this strategy is lacking also at different levels, not only at the level of this plea for humanity. It is not something that is organized in a political manner. This is a grassroots initiative. It is a citizens' movement, and I have to admit that it is influenced by the fact that elections are forthcoming in Slovakia in March next year, and they will be marked by the refugee crisis. And I'm afraid that they are, I hope not, but I'm afraid they will confirm the power of the current ruling party, which has based its strategy on the protection against refugees.
Very urgent to create strategies. Now, in Vienna, Shamsa Sadi, you have created these strategies. You've been dealing with these questions. I want to return to the current fear that some of you have been talking about. The fear that the terrorists come sneaking in with the refugees. Now, in Vienna, so many people arrive by train or otherwise into the city. How do you deal with this very obvious fear that with so many people coming in, some of those people must be harboring evil thoughts about Europe and aggressive ideas for other attacks?
To be honest, this fear is not really just from the population. I would say it's not at least from majority of the population. It's just a small part of the population. According to the history of Vienna, there is a long history of accepting or just being a welcoming society for refugees. Look at the 1950s, what happened as Hungarian people, they came to Austria, and more than 50% of them, they stayed in Vienna. And just the history of Vienna is just very tightly bounded with the history of migration from Europe. And then 50s from Hungarian, then 68, it was 118,000 people from Czechoslovakia at that time. They came to Austria, and most of them, they stayed in Vienna. And then in 1990s, from 1992 until 1994, we had more than 120,000 people from Balkan just war. They came to Austria, and most of them, they stayed in Vienna. And then this time also people, most of them, they are the second, third generation of the migrants, and of course the refugees, they are in Vienna. And just if you look at the Viennese population, we have 49% of the population, they are not born in Vienna. So, or they have some migration history. It's a little bit easier to have the newcomers in Vienna. And
may I ask you in between, may I ask you, what is your personal migration history?
my personal migration history is I was born in Iran, then I immigrated 2 or 3 times within Iran, but I mean, I had 3 languages as just I was born, and just Azerbaijani, Farsi, and French. And then I was in Turkey for some years, and just I studied in Turkey in an American university, and then I was in the States, and it came to Vienna, then I went to States and again came back to Vienna. So my history, my personal history is also very combined with migration, and just it's somehow if you stay in a city, just all of the world, I feel myself as just citizen. So just
of course.
Sorry, it's a side
But it might.
But in Vienna, don't forget we have a strong leadership. And last year, as at the Austrian level, it was discussed if we take the Syrian people, the national policies, they told, okay, we are going to accept 5,000 Syria, but they have to be Christians. So Austria accepted 5,000 Christians from Syria, and then it was discussion. Our mayor told in last September, everybody who needs help, we are going to help them. So we people, they came to Vienna, they came to, we have just a very critical point in Austria for the people, they come to Austria, they stay there, is Traiskirchen. And Traiskirchen is a really just, it's a shame for a Western country to have such a spot in this country. But during the last year and just until end of June, we try to take out the families, the young girls, and just the minors, just without any company, and the boys, and bring them to Vienna. So it was a good strategy, and then we just are politicians, and we discussed within the city, and we knew that there is going to be such a movement. And then just beginning of July, because last year even UNHCR told that we are not going to keep the people longer time in Libya or just in different surrounding countries because there is no money for food. These people, they will leave to Europe. And we took it very serious. And then last, just at the beginning of July, we have, since this July, we have a coordinator for refugees. And then we try to provide the people just with fundamental rights that they come, just shelter and just food and everything. And then it was our really just officially commitment that we are a city with most of the city's migrants, and then we are going to have a welcome culture. And we work on it.
I mean, I want to ask you something. You and your colleagues, you're creating this welcome culture in Vienna. But for you, it's more than just a job that you do behind your desk. You told me before this that you also spend your weekends, your private time, going to the stations, to the camps, to do whatever you can to help the people. Can I ask you something? Do you meet newcomers in Vienna that you think, I don't know if you should be here. I don't know if you should become a citizen of our country?
No, to be honest, I don't have any prejudgment. Because I myself, as I came to Vienna, I was a young student, and I came to Vienna and I didn't speak any word of German. And nobody thought that I'm going to stay in Vienna, and after some years I will be in the city of Vienna just as a officer in the city. So being open-minded, and just we have a lot of people, they come from Afghanistan, and they are they are illiterate people, they cannot write and they can read.
But even without prejudice, even with the open mind that you have, I can imagine you meet people that you think you're not so many people are coming who deserve to be with us here, but you might meet people that you have questions about.
I mean, if they don't accept the values, just if it's democracy or women's rights, for example. I mean, the most important point for being an open-minded society is just to accepting the women's rights. If they don't accept the women's rights, or we have some difficulties or some issues or challenges with the girls that the parents, they don't send them to the schools. And then it's a huge challenge, but we don't give it up. Or just we provide we have about 8 or 10 buildings for, or just homes for women. And one of them, they are just for young girls that they are forced to marry. Okay. So if you have some migrants or just they are newcomers, we call them newcomers, not refugees, because, or just not asylum seekers, because to be respectful, newcomers, if they don't respect this part of the human rights and child rights, for example, it's one of my, by instance, it's one of my focus points for the next years to work on child rights or children rights. So if such fundamental rights, they are not really accepted. So we have some difficulties, but it's a collective challenge.
Yes.
And so we have
and
to work on
your
it.
first response to people who don't immediately subscribe to the values of Austrian society, your first response is not to have them deported, but to have them changed.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. You have to really take time and invest money, because you have to invest a lot, and we invest already. We have 2 programs for just newcomers in order to welcome to Vienna, and it's just as immediate as they register. There is a coaching for them and just for recognition of their qualification, because if you let the people just without doing nothing wait, then different directions they come in this area. Just you have to really take the people and just according their qualification observe them to the labor market. And I know we have a lot of regulations from national level, but at least we work on some areas that it is open, and we take the women and of course men and young people, just try them to just qualified education, language courses. We have, most of our really just investments, they go to language courses.
Great. So, time, energy, knowledge, and patience. Olmida, can I ask you the same thing I just asked to Shams Azidi? You spent time in Calais, in the so-called jungle. Most of the people there are men, I guess. I haven't been there. Do you meet people there who fit the description of the unwanted profit seeker, radical? Because I can imagine you meet so many angry, frustrated, restless guys, about to explode in one way or other.
I'm going to respond to a few things that have come up, because have I met people that maybe personally I thought, oh, this is a dodgy person, for instance, because I think we need to bring it down to that level, and when we speak about that fear, we need to be honest. Where does it come from? It comes from a basic level of emotional response. To be honest, I haven't so much, but I remember the first time that I arrived, I was very vigilant. And I arrived with a volunteer, grassroots volunteer, who had taken a 3 months old baby. And when she did, I didn't understand it, but it was very beautiful, because what she had done for the mostly men was to show humanity that if I can bring the thing that is most important to me, this fragile state, I'm showing you that I trust you to take care of this. And this is what happened. But there were a few people, sometimes we backed away. So I think this is an interesting question, but I wanted to link it to something, and that is the idea of the deserving and the undeserving refugee. And I think we need to untangle this now. in Britain, we have this discussion a lot. I think there is a notion of the deserving one who's been fleeing with maybe the last scraps on their back and who's arriving, and I think a few elements have to be in place. For instance, we have, when the pictures are shown of refugees with their mobile phones, there's criticism. Well, if they have mobile phones, how can they be refugees? And we need to rethink the whole debate. We are in 2015. A lot of people who have made it so far are also middle class. They're coming with, they have resources that allowed them to arrive there. They're not the poorest of the poor as sometimes. Are there some, I'm going to just say it in this way, dodgy characters in the camp? Absolutely. But what I think I wanted to add to the discussion of fear is that we should not underestimate, we should not underestimate the people who've come here who are so shocked at how they have been treated in Europe, and this is what I have heard so many times, and actually Bulgaria ranked very high, that how the Bulgarian police treated them. Some people have said to me, I fled genocide to come here, and the way the police treats me, that's a breeding ground that wasn't there before, that is now there, and now they're stuck without any sanitation, without anything, and they have time to radicalize themselves because they're so disillusioned by this Project Europe.
So that's the question many people ask, certainly in France right now. Is that place, regardless of all the deserving refugees, but is that place also a breeding ground for angry young men who might create a danger to society?
I don't think so. I think what you see, and was it, where are we this week? I think in the beginning of this week there were some protests coming from what they call the jungle, and there was young men fed up, blocked the street, which is always the street towards the Euro tunnel, so that at night time a lot of the men try to make it through the tunnel and then try to make it onto a lorry on the train, and they were protesting with a large number, so there were confrontations with police, rubber bullets, tear gas, etc. I don't think, and don't quote me this, I'm not a politician, I assess this on a very, very basic emotional level and hanging out there. I think that is what happens. People are fed up. No more jungle. The reason they call it the jungle, and people know that there, is because they feel they are not human. They are not treated human in Calais. One young Afghan guy said, when I go to Calais, nobody wants to sit next to me. They don't speak to me. So if you treat somebody like an animal, yes, they might be inclined to throw a stone at you. But it is, I think the confrontation is very localized on that access street between police and that. But who, so I want to say if there's an attack, I think we must think what we're doing to people. That is also a breeding ground. Yes?
Well, we have in mind the story from Vienna, which is such a different approach. But you yourself, personally, because as a writer, it is your how do you say, your challenge, almost your duty to go deeply into the personal truth of stories. So you personally, do you feel unsafe? Have you felt unsafe in this jungle?
No, but we don't spend the nights there. And I think it's a very different place at night. I'm not going to lie. I think in the day it's absolutely super safe. You walk around, everybody wants to talk to you. They're hungry to talk to people. They appreciate that you come. And because it is a show of humanity, as you probably will know when you go to the camp, that there's no, I see you. At night, no. And this last trip was interesting because I heard more of that. That also, you're right, it's mostly men, but more women have been coming and more unaccompanied children. But even men said that they would not walk around without anything at night, that the nighttime is a different time.
Have they set up a kind of, how do you say, inner security
I'm not aware
presence?
of that. There could be, but I'm not aware of that. I think people organize themselves in communities. It's ramshackle, but it's also quite organized. So there's areas for women and there's areas for families that have more permanent structures. I spend a lot of times with a lot of people from Darfur, and they organize small communities, like almost like clans or families, where they stay together around this like small yard. When you say these words, you have different images. It doesn't look like a yard, but so I think then that's the security system, is to have this adopted family that you're spending your time with. But there might be other things from the volunteers. I'm not aware of it.
There is, I mean, a place like Calais and many other refugee centers, camps, whatever, are characterized by the temporality of the people. Because in principle, your stay there is temporary. In principle, you want to leave tomorrow. Yeah, so it's very difficult to create and to learn and to develop into your new society because you're temporary. But still under those circumstances. For instance, if you stay in a new place, you will have to get to know the neighbors, get to know the people you don't know, people who are different from you. Can you see this happening in Calais?
Yeah, of course you have local volunteers as well. I think it's very, like everything is very complicated. People nearby probably also fed up, but there's also a lot of people helping out and volunteering.
But I mean also between communities of refugees?
Communities, yes. For instance, a very good example is
Somalians, Afghans.
Yes. For instance, Ethiopians and Eritreans who are there because they're fleeing their conflict. And because there are a few of them, they have to stick together because their culture is so similar. And it's almost, I don't know what the right word is. I don't want to be disrespectful, but it's ridiculous in a way. So you're sitting there, and they can go to the same church. All of a sudden, it's possible. There's a lot of separation in into different camps. So that's maybe also sad that we are just the world. In terms, we just want to be with ourselves and nobody other. You know?
At this moment, the positive voices, like many of the people here, say, okay, come, be welcome, stay with us, but mingle, join. And a place like that is a kind of laboratory for that, yeah?
Yes, was a beautiful young volunteer from France who converted to Islam in January, and I spent a bit of time with him, and he said actually this is a laboratory for Islam because all the different fractions who are fighting each other so fiercely, they have to get along because you need each other's help so much more than in the real world, just for basic things. So you're right. Yeah.
Interesting. So the different voices of Islam, different faces, interpretations of Islam are all stuck together there.
And yeah.
It's the
and
right.
It's packed. I mean, there's a lot of people on a very small, small blueprint. I don't like, as I said, I'm very particular about my words, but I went in the beginning of October and in the end, and in that month, it was an explosion. It doubled in size, and this place is already ill-equipped.
Yeah. Populist politicians' nightmare, yeah? Ivan Krastev, talking about populist politicians and citizens and journalists and academics, I want to see how all of you speak with the people who don't agree with you. Because a thing like Paris, and yes, this is the same in Turkey right now, and in Egypt right now, and in Syria right now, but also in Western Europe right now. A thing like Paris brings all the differences and the contrast to the surface, yeah? It's less easy to be polite after things like these. How do you speak, how do you argument with people that don't agree with you?
Listen, I do believe if you really want to talk to people who disagree with you at this moment, you should convince them that at least you know details. You're not simply expressing opinion. Because this is very also contextual or logical. One of the biggest problems with this type, especially of the resettlement policies, you're trying to send people where there is a housing. In many places where there is a housing, you have dying villages with 50, 60 old people basically waiting to die there. There is no life.
You're talking about Bulgaria or more general?
I'm talking about Bulgaria, I'm talking about different places. Because listen, what is different is, it's one thing country like Hungary to say we are closing the borders. The country that closed the border last week was Sweden. And Sweden is not the country that you basically say they're xenophobic, they don't care about people, they don't want to integrate. So from this point of view, for me, the biggest debate the major argument was it was Merkel who did it.
America.
Yeah, no, Merkel. America is
Merkel,
a different
Merkel,
conversation, which is
Merkel,
also
yeah.
coming always, but it
Sorry.
was Merkel. And listen, and this is very important, because people don't know the most important stuff. If Germany was insisting on Dublin rules to be respected, there are not going to be a single refugee in Germany. Because Germany is not bordering any unsafe country. What Chancellor understood, and I do believe it was a right political decision. I'm not talking about the moral impulse and so on. It was strategically right. She basically understood a very simple reality. In the last year, I don't know why, and this is something European citizens should keep European Commission responsible for. European Commission reduced twice the number of money that we have been giving to the refugee camps in Lebanon and basically other serious neighbors. This is a major problem. But the second part of the problem was that people that have been staying in the camps, and this is the people from the camps that are coming now. It's not the people running from the Islamic State, by the way. Were people who basically stayed there because we told them Assad must go. So they're waiting for Assad to go.
And you're speaking of the people Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey.
Jordan, Turkey. These people have been there. We're talking about 4 million people. And now I'm talking just Syria. So they're staying there. And basically, the only way to expect people to return is when they're staying in the neighboring countries. But they stayed for 2 years. They saw their country being totally devastated. And they understood that in a way there is no way back. Even for the middle class people, even for people that have businesses. So then these people should change their strategy. And the only way and place for them to go was Europe. And people were on the move. And all our intelligences knew that people were on the move. And countries like Italy and Greece were becoming totally incapable. It's here not simply about treating people badly and so on. They were incapable to deal with them. And then for Germany there was a choice. One is to close itself, something which they did during the Euro crisis. But then it was going to be the disintegration of the European Union from the periphery, because simply these countries were going to collapse. The second was Germany to try to make this a pan-European crisis, which is going to give some chance for a big European solution. This is what the German Chancellor did. And she did it by opening Germany. Just give you one example. Now we have a negotiations as European Union with Turkey about basically keeping the border together, and very much our kind of a strategy is based on Turkey. This also has a cost, but it's different. Can you imagine Germany negotiating with Turkey if there were not this number of refugees in Germany? Can Germany, with not 1,000 refugees, going to Erdogan and said, keep your 2.5 million? This is something that people understand when you start to explain. Because the problem with the populist politicians is that they're very rhetorical. When some of them said, be tough, go and be tough. Go and shoot on the border. When you're shooting, somebody's going to shoot against you. And then the problem of the radicalization of people who are already here. Because one of the biggest problems is not the people that are going to come through as refugees. Listen, some people are going to come, but they're also coming as tourists. Are we going to ban tourism? No. But we have more than 5,000 European-born foreign fighters in Syria. And one of the interesting stories how you're treating them. Here, Austria, in my view, made a very sensible decision. They said people who are going to come back, if they don't have basically crimes to them, we're not going to arrest them immediately. By the way, this is a high risk, because do you know how much resources are invested in order simply to follow these people? But this is the only way to tell them that they have way back. Because if they don't have a way back, they should fight till the end.
Yeah.
And I do believe this type of a conversation is possible.
For instance, in Holland, proven fighters in Syria, if they come back, lose their nationality.
Yeah.
So that's the other.
No, but
policy.
my idea is that if you want to have a talk with people who are scared, who basically are not part of the consensus, who basically don't believe it's about their humanity, but it's about their interest, you should talk about details and you should know more than them.
Yeah.
Because what people cannot stand when they are very fearful, when basically somebody starts to accuse them on the moral grounds.
Yeah.
And I don't believe we're doing service to ourselves if we're going to adopt this talk.
One clarification question. Are you saying that Angela Merkel has this policy of opening up and receiving so many refugees in order to strengthen the idea of the European Union?
Listen, why she did it, probably even she doesn't know. Because they're different type of things, they're emotional others. So at the end of the day, you're inventing for yourselves what you did it and why. I do believe that from a pure pragmatic point of view, this was the only policy that can basically give certain room of maneuvering for the European Union. Part of the problem comes with the reaction of some of our governments, including the Slovak one. They did it out of a pure provincialism. But this changed the relationship between Germany and Central Europe in a big way. And because what happened was that for all these years, Central Europeans were going to Germany and say, listen, we have a problem, you should help. For example, Balts and the Poles going to Germany in the Russian crisis and basically saying, listen, we feel insecure. We want to be sure that you are not going to make a deal with the Russians behind our back. Germany adopted a tough line, so she expected that when she goes to these countries, she can expect a similar reaction, because it was a solidarity also on the level of political leaders. It didn't work. When she said, I had a problem, they said, it's your problem, you created the problem. My feeling is that this is a very critical moment, because speaking politically, what we're not discussing now is what is going to be the impact of the refugee crisis on the European Union. The first thing that is coming is that when it comes to refugee crisis, and this is very different than the euro, people start to believe that their own national governments are the only one to protect them. Then you start to have a competition between different member states. All this talk about walls between the members of the European Union is a different conversation. So from this point of view, we have a crisis which, in my view, is much deeper and much more dangerous for the very survival of the European Union as we know it than, for example, was the Euro crisis.
The refugee crisis is more of a threat to the European Union than the Euro crisis. Michal, can I turn to you when we bring it back to Slovakia? If there is such a fear here of the unknown, of Muslims, of Islam, of terrorism, and if you can anticipate on the coming of newcomers in any case, and you are one of these people who are trying to go against the mainstream here and to create more openness, more accommodation. Are there things you're hearing from the people here that you would like to hear more about to copy for the Slovak society?
Jednoznačne myslím si, že Slovensko...
Yes, I think Slovakia has a lot to learn. And Austria is our neighbor, and we have a very intense exchange at the level of mayors and Bundesländer, of regions. So something is really happening. And in Slovakia, there are many people who are active here and also abroad under development aid. And this year we have discussed even more about the fact that we have this year the European Year of Development Cooperation. Not many people know that, I guess, but one of the proofs that we are not complying with our promises, our undertakings at the international level, we always say, let's address problems there where they occur. We have just heard how the money for the refugee camps were cut in the countries which are close to the conflicts, and we have development cooperation in Slovakia developed, but it's still not enough. It is underdeveloped. And on the other hand, we spoke about security and who feels secure well. And I felt very secure also in Afghanistan, in Mazar-i Sharif, in Kabul. And what I read in newspapers, I would think that maybe Slovak forests are not so safe because there are groups of Slovak neo-Nazis who try to infiltrate our schools and try to teach dubious things our children. So maybe Slovak forests are even more dangerous than Kabul. So we have here spoken always here, I mean, on the stage about Islam, but I think Paris was in fact a mirror showing us what is the result of a religious fanaticism and political extremism. It has nothing to do with Islam. It's fanaticism, the worst category, and the highest hatred against mankind and against life. And here, in our very often closed societies of Eastern Europe, have to do a lot with religious fanaticism and political extremism. It's our own. We don't need Islam for that. We can serve ourselves well enough. So when we speak about these hundreds of victims everywhere and all over continent, but let's mention this wave of refugees from former Yugoslavia who ended in Hungary. Maybe people don't know, but they are there. In Austria they are. And in that conflict, more than 25,000 Bosnian Muslims were killed by Christians in the name of Christianity, and they killed Muslims. So the conflict has many facets, and I'm afraid that we simplify it in our discourse, because in this wave we have more Muslims among the refugees, but we speak about a territory which is contaminated by violence. I mean, here we have territory contaminated by tragedies, and it's a real challenge whether we can cope with it and learn from the stories and to see the people who work in different areas. And I think it is very inspiring for us here in Bratislava, here in Slovakia. And I think we have to catch up. There is a lot of we have to catch up with. Ďakujem, Michal. Yeah. Shamsa.
The municipality of Vienna have frequent contacts with the people in the municipality of Bratislava, being so close and familiar. Are you contemplating, for instance, that you could relieve Vienna of some of this influx of newcomers by redirecting them towards Slovakia?
Off the record.
Mm-hmm. Off the record.
We have some contacts with municipality of Bratislava, and we have a central area, and just we work together, and sometimes so very intensively, sometimes less intensively. But I guess the societies, they are so different that you cannot just transfer one idea or just policy to the other, because you have to catch the momentum, and you have to really catch the reality of the society.
Well, maybe this was a bit radical, but maybe, I mean, in Vienna you have such an experience and a knowledge that you could. How are you working to transfer that knowledge and experience to a country like Slovakia?
We had some programs. Just the first one, the opening program, because we have intensive work with all of the new members at that time, 2004 and 2007, of new members of European Union, and then we worked together. And then it was just about, I don't know, just designing of the public spaces, and then just youth problems or issues and something else. And then some years ago there was a joint project between Republic Slovakia and Czech, and then they invited me. It was just two programs from the Ministry of Interior Affairs and to Ministry of External or just Foreign Affairs, and they tried to invite some experts, and I had just really honored to be one of them, and I worked with national level, and there was some programs that we tried to discuss, and I invited a delegation to Vienna and just to show them the highlights of our integration policies. I think we can learn from each other. Maybe there is some new policies in Slovakia or in Bratislava that we can learn also, because just to be honest, I think all of us, we have a lot of good experiences.
Sure.
Just I'm the last person that I can tell Vienna is just super place and we can just transfer all of our policies here. No, it's impossible. But if there is wish or desire, of course, I mean, in all of the areas, I can just at least help, or just I can act as a bridge in order to get to Vienna and just its policies.
Okay, this is actually an open invitation to anybody here in Bratislava, including you, Michal, to invite Shams Asadi more than happens now. Because in between the lines, you're actually saying that there is a disappointing level of official communication.
How can I tell? The politicians, they come and they go. And then in some countries, and I don't know, I'm not sure, but maybe in Bratislava we had the experience that we worked together, and in next months or next years we couldn't find our colleagues again here. And the continuity, it was a little bit problem. But but in Vienna, I mean, politicians, they come and they go, but we from the city administration, public administration, we are there, and I've worked for the city of Vienna for more than 20 years. So everybody can find me there, but we had some different experiences.
The audience was, part of the audience was just applauding, how do you say, saluting the disappeared politicians. I'm sure with these people on stage, with this experience and fearless kind of questioning, you have some questions for the people on stage here as well. So microphone will go into the audience. If we can get some lights, we can see you. And raise your hand. I see one hand here. Could we have a bit of light on the audience? We can sort of see you. Could you stand up and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Valeria Kораблева, IWM. Am I heard? Is it okay? Yeah. Thank you so much for the discussion. I have two questions for you. The discussion of refugees usually implies the discussion of the human rights. But half a century ago, Hannah Arendt mentioned that civil rights are even more important than human rights, because it's not only the matter of biological survival. So my question goes, is there any clear strategy of the political integration or representation of refugees? What is implied here? Sort of assimilation, or they should be represented as a community? So are these issues tackled in any way? And the second, can I also?
Excellent question. First, to who is this question addressed? To Shams Asadi?
Yes, probably yes.
Let's take this one first,
Okay,
yeah? Because it's an important question. Welcoming is one thing. Policy for the future is the next step.
We just don't distinguish the newcomers from the migrants that we had already in our society. We know that, for example, the children of these migrants, they go to the school because one of my in September we have Stadtschulrat. It's just the authority of school authority. I went to the school authorities and asked human rights. We are a human rights city. What are going to happen to the rights of children if they come here? Are they going to go to the school, or will they just wait until their parents they are settled here? No. In human rights city and right of education, each child that came to Vienna from the first day, of course we have some refugees that they really already they want to go to Germany. But if they decided to stay in Austria, and if they decided to stay in Vienna, because within our federal provinces, we have 9 federal provinces. Nobody just, there was exactly like European level, we had a lot of discussions about how many refugees is the city of Vienna is going to take, how many refugees are going to Lower Austria or Upper Austria, and so on. And city of Vienna, there is some some capacity of refugees as each province has taken, and we just doubled our capacity, and it's just 200% maybe. Just we took the refugees, and from the first day, the children went to the school.
This is one thing.
And it's
this is a citizen's right.
Citizens' rights, but it's human rights also. It's
exactly.
right
So,
to
so
education.
for you, human rights leads to citizens' right immediately. Does this also go for the right to work?
No, the right to the work is the national level, and you have to, wait 4 months at least until approval of the process of just you are a recognized asylum seeker or refugee at that time.
But you can work
And
if you're still in the procedure.
in some areas, and it's like agriculture or just gastronomy and so on. But city of Vienna, it's one of our most important, just how can I tell? It's one of our requests on the national level that if they are applied, they have to just if they are applied, okay, they go and just they are normal citizens. But on the processing of the refugee approval, we want to people to could be at the labor market and just take a work that according to their qualification. And it's something that we negotiate with the national level.
Okay. So, as an answer to your question, yes, citizens' rights in Vienna follow from human rights. What was your next question?
Thank you again. Thank you for the answer. The second question goes to any willing participant, and it goes back to the Paris attack, because right now it feels that we are following the scenario of these attacks. So is there any chance not to follow this scenario? Because it looks like any measure would be exactly what terrorists are expecting from us to do.
What is the scenario? Sketch it.
Okay, to make the borders, to rise the fear, to whatever. So to fall out the Europe logic as a tolerant, inclusive entity. And for me, for example, I saw a very powerful symbolic message in this hashtag in Twitter, porte ouverte, this open door, which is symbolically opposing to the idea of closed borders. So is it really a way to somehow to break this logic of fear?
Ivan Kastev, this is a question for you. Are we going to follow the 9/11 scenario or not?
Listen, and here the 9/11, of course, is going to play a very important role. One of the things that happened was that we know very much how America overreacted. On the other side, 14 years after 9/11, you don't have a major terrorist attack in the United States. And this is going to be one of the major arguments for a much more security-minded part of our public. I don't believe that we can replicate this, just to make it very clear. And the most difficult conversation is how you're negotiating with your own population that we are not going to have the level of security that we had before. This is the tough, because it's not about one act or the other act. There is no police in the world that can guarantee you that they are not going to be a terrorist act. It's a very low organization of individual things can happen. But there is a very important story concerning liberal democracy being put on such type of a pressure. I really like to quote somebody who has been doing an interesting work on this. There was this famous book by an American political scientist, Ira Katznelson, called Fear Itself. And it was very much about Roosevelt's 1932 policy. He believes that the biggest problem with the Great Depression was that people had the feeling that it was not simply that there was a huge risks, but there was a total uncertainty. Your previous experience cannot help you to know how to react. And they had the feeling that the governments don't understand this because the governments were saying we're going to do business as usual. And then Roosevelt came and demonstrated that within the framework of a liberal democracy, you can have an effective and decisive government. Here's the problem, because listen, we can decide that we're not going to play for the scenario and we're not going to close here and there. Imagine 2 or 3 more terrorist attacks like this in Brussels or Paris in the next 10 days. And then the public goes panic. And then you really have a huge problem to communicate with this public. Because in the moment of crisis, what is opposite to trust is not mistrust, but it's fear. And fear is a very special feeling when it comes to politics. Also, the politicians themselves, they don't know very much how to react. Because don't forget, we are led by a generation of people who are very competent, at least some of them, but they don't have a real crisis experience. Crisis experience that is related to the problem of a public goes mad for different type of reasons, and the social media is making it very difficult now. So I do believe that getting the balance right is going to be the major story. And here, the political instinct of the leaders makes a lot of difference. For example, Vienna elections was one of the way really to reassure European publics that the refugee crisis does not mean victory for the far right. Because this is the other story. By the way, when I'm reading these days far right is going to benefit totally out of it, we don't know this. Because also in the time of a bigger crisis, people very much mobilize under the flag. Hollande can end up, by the way, becoming the biggest winner out of this. You know how basically he benefited from the previous terrorist attack. So from this point of view, but we have such a high level of uncertainty that any advice being given on principle, which is valid for all countries, is going to be wrong. So the most important is to get the right balance of policy, keeping in mind how people feel. Part of the problem in some of the countries in the European Union was that we have a police forces in Central and Eastern Europe quite ineffective, some of them quite corrupt, at least I'm talking about my own country. By the way, we have a major police protest for totally different reasons for the last 2 weeks. Policemen have been demonstrating in Bulgaria against basically the government, and then this happens. I do believe that all our fears that our own governments are not performing comes and strengthen this feeling that situation is out of control. And I do believe this is very important. This is not a kind of a universal story. Otherwise, I totally agree with you. Any terrorist acts basically bets on one important thing. We have created crisis. Governments are going to overreact.
Are you seeing
the crisis is going to?
Are you seeing one politician who has this sense of balance that you're talking about?
Listen, it's very difficult because the crisis is not over. As I told you, I do believe, personally, I could be wrong, and if she's going to lose the elections, I do believe that Europe is going to pay a high price for this. I do believe that Merkel was right in the way that she basically decided Germany to become kind of the major center of this crisis politics, because Germany is one of the countries that can afford it. Is it going to work? I don't know, because don't forget, there is one major problem with Germany. When it comes to politics, not to economics, in the last 10 years, Germany was outlier. German domestic politics has nothing to do with the politics that we know. Their major parties were still trusted enough. Their mainstream media was trusted enough. There was quite enough consensus in the society, well-functioning grand coalition government. You can end up with the elections in which you're going to end up with a far-right party in Germany, which is going to be a major change for the German politics. And like the colleagues in Austria know, this is changing very much the behavior of the other parties. It's not simply how much votes they're going to get, but how much they're going to affect others. So from this point of view, I do believe it's a really deep crisis, and we should try to basically be relevant on every different stage of it.
Okay. Shamsa Sadi, you wanted to add something to this? Very quickly?
Very briefly, some 2 or 3 points. I really do agree with you, Ivan, that it's a crisis that we don't know. But the experiences from the last 2 days in Paris showed that people, they were asked, please don't go out of your flats. What happened last night, there was a concert just behind the doors of there, and then it was a piano concert, and there was a lot of people over there. And just, I read a little bit of Le Monde and different newspapers, and the civil society, they act completely different as their politicians told. So we cannot just really, at least in most of the Western European countries, what the politicians tell, it's not really the whole history, and just it's not the whole decision. So because without considering the civil society, it's impossible to decide. And then about Merkel, there was a lot of, articles and just even a lot of maybe books, but one of them, it's written from a different Rainer Warburg. You know him definitely. He's an Austrian scientist, I would say, and population. He wrote and he told in 7 years, Germany is going to take the benefits of this crisis. And with facts and a lot of, just reasons that he brought, because financially, for the time being, Germany is going to invest a lot. But in 7 years, the people, because Germany is confronted with the declining of the population, and Syrian people, if the really measures for integration and just settlement of these people at the labor market functions very well, it's an enormous just profit for Germany, at least in 7 years. 7 years is just nothing in compared to our histories.
Great, and that's an important argument. So you received two answers. Yes, the sense of balance that we look for in our politicians, not to repeat the 9/11 scenario, but civil society also has a role. And if they find each other in a self-interest, then might see another scenario happening. Here's one question up front.
Thank you. Thank you for the debate. I'm sorry. You're speaking a lot about politicians and about looking for balance. I don't expect balance from politicians, but what really strikes me is that how society is getting so harshly polarized. And what I really have problems with is trying to find some balance in the society or in the very close circles of my friends when it comes to attitudes towards the attacks, towards the refugees coming. And basically, my question for anyone who is willing to answer is how to keep sanity, reason, humanity, and the balance. Thank you.
It's a great question, and I would like you, Michal, to answer, but also Olumide to answer. Because both of you have been thinking and speaking about how to respond, yes, in the circle around you, yes, as an individual. Go ahead.
Ďakujem.
Thank you. If I may, I will answer in Slovak. I believe that I completely understand what you're saying. We have a similar problem, and I believe it's something that every critically thinking person has been going through during the last weeks and months, being confronted with what they see on the websites, in the media, etc. Yes, there is something that affects us very deeply when we see that elemental humanity is vanishing from communication around certain themes. And this has led to some real extremes. This is also helped by the influx of totally uncontrollable political forces emerging from various media, show business, where the only intention is to attract attention. There are politicians with no agenda, politicians who conceive policy as a show, as a business plan. And this is combined with our oligarchic democracy, and the result is a very sad situation in the public discourse area. I think that we should not get discouraged, and we have to preserve a certain authenticity and the belief that there is also another view, another way of experiencing things, and we cannot succumb to the simplification or propaganda. It's very difficult, but I think it's not only our problem, it is a problem that's becoming global. But I can see it in myself, in my own example, that people that I know, I'm shocked with what they're saying, with their opinions. But on the other hand, it is the proof that that our generation was said that after revolution we got everything as a gift, like open borders, freedom, etc. But it suddenly seems that we will have to face tremendous challenges brought about by the current situation, that nothing has been won. We all have to win the same struggles as those that were fought by our ancestors in this part of the world. So what I see is not the reason to but I think this is the reason to work even harder.
I'm going to respond on a personal level because you also asked very personal. I agree very much. We must not be discouraged, and I don't know how to frame this. That's why I'm hesitating. And we must also see the productive moment here, because it's a total crisis on so many levels. And again, being a creative person, the only new thing arises from chaos. That's where the new stage starts, and we must use our imagination and we must engage with everybody. I think really the productive moment is that things are coming onto the table. I recently spoke about this in my frustration with the so-called liberals and the language they use, and it stems. Okay, but the productive moment is that they are now using this language openly. Before the refugee crisis, you couldn't do that, not in the UK, because then you would have been possibly more in the right-wing sector and you didn't want to expose yourself. Now we have this moment where things are up on the table, everybody's sort of open, and that we can work with. It's painful, very painful, and it's frustrating, and it's so painful because it is... Paris it's impossible. The refugee crisis itself is impossible. But I think there's a productive moment in there that we must find in debate with each other each and every time. But it's very, very exhausting. And as a writer, obviously, I believe in humanizing facts. That I think it doesn't numbers. I'm not a political theorist. I'm not a politician. Numbers do not reach us. So of course, on my answer is the humanizing of it. And if we were in the UK, I would say volunteer, go to Calais, because the engagement changes you. And the volunteers there, I would give an example. The first time I arrived, I hitched a ride back to where I was sleeping with somebody who volunteered from Calais. He didn't, just a random person I didn't know before, he did not have a very leftist view. He thought that most of the people in the camp were economic migrants, undeserving refugees, yet he gave his weekends and he was helping out and is volunteering. And that is an interesting moment where things happen, because it's that maybe that complicatedness, allowing that fear, or one of the many fears that we have, to come out in the open, but we are engaging now, where I think often we're just very, very detached.
Shamsa Sari wanted to add something. So you're getting a personal response from everybody here on stage.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, because it's very important. And just underline, really I underline both, my colleagues here, but the role of media is very important, because we had the same position in Vienna, and just we didn't know that what's going to happen. Just role of media, just really they started to write, and just very positively about the refugees, and just they came to Vienna. It's very important. And even it was just some kind of struggle for the right-wing media to just not to write the positive things, or at least they started to just be silent and don't write. So it was some kind of really good strategy just to, in the society, just it's some kind of just shaping of the ideas or opinions building. And then individuals, you told, yes, individuals, very important. We had in Vienna on 20th of September a huge demonstration, about 100,000 people, they came to the street, and it was just only one young woman. She started on social media, and just all of the NGOs and civil society, they helped. And then we had a concert on 3rd of October, and it was again 120,000 people over there at Heldenplatz. And the reason was just famous singers and from Germany and from Austria, they came, and they it was some kind of we are here and we know, and especially from second or third generation of the refugees, that their parents, they came to Austria as refugees, and these young people, or some of them, even they're not young, they are in my age, but they started to really tell, okay, we are the ancestors of the refugees, and we have to not be silent, and we will go on activities. And the third point is telling stories, and then we started to tell stories about the refugees, and just in order to get to them personally and just privately, who they are, from they come, and just what are their problems, what are their struggles. And the other point, I had 2 days ago just a conference with women and fleeing from their own countries, and we discussed a lot of Austrian, all NGOs and politicians, and just I myself and the podium. But this was the most important point. There was a lady from Syria, and she stand up and she told, look, you are speaking about refugees, but let me tell you my story. And then she started to speak about her story and about the prison and about the whole way that she just had behind her to come to Vienna. And then these are the stories that you have to share. Because, we haven't the experiences that these people, they had. And it's very important to let them to speak.
Great. Finally.
Listen, for me the most important is that people like to self-respect them. And from this point of view, even people who now basically are very hostile and so on, they know that this position, even pragmatically, could be right, but it cannot be morally right. So I do believe that part of this overexcitement, especially in the social media, comes from the fact that people know that there is something wrong with allowing vulnerable people basically to die on your borders. So I do believe the most important in all this is to try to give an opportunity for people to go through this crisis of theirs. Because the problem with social media is that they're making everything emotionally more kind of loaded than normally it is. People communicate very actively. Psychologists have figured out that when like-minded people actively discuss between themselves, they radicalize their views in one direction or the other. Pro-refugee group becomes more radical, anti-refugee groups become more radical. And I do believe fighting for the middle, this is why institutions matter. This is why mainstream media matters. Because otherwise you can end up with a very polarized society. And this level of polarization also has a cost, not only for this crisis. I do believe that this happened in the United States. When you're basically listening to the presidential debates of 2 different parties, you don't have the feeling that they're living in the same country. It's not that they have a different position how to run the country. They speak as if they're really populating different countries. And I do believe we should not allow this to happen. So this is why I do believe, you know what, talking to people who even said bullshit. This is like talking to somebody who went through personal trauma. Because for most of these people, there is also personal trauma. There are very few classical xenophobes in this world. But there are a lot of anxious people. And I do believe that patience helps. Because there are problems that cannot be resolved, that can be outlived. At least this is what my wise grandmother was going to say.
Thanks to your grandmother. And thanks for reminding us of the middle ground, because I felt we were almost radicalizing the good force here, but you reminded us to keep a bit of the middle. Listen, we're running out of time because 15 minutes from now we have an equally strong group of people here discussing the future of the Visegrad countries. I found this immensely encouraging after Friday night. I think Gilles Kepel would be very sorry that he wasn't here, because I think he would have been encouraged as well. So I really want to thank you, and your applause for Ivan Krastev and Olumide Popula and Shams Asadi and Michal Rwet.